Do you feel like anxiety is holding you back from being the best version of yourself? In this episode, we're going to dive into 5 different ways to overcome and work with our anxiety. And just as a preface for this video, too, just wanting to kind of talk a little bit about what anxiety actually is. And I think one thing really important to understand, I looked up where the word comes from. And in Greek, the word for anxiety comes from a Greek word, onko, which actually means to choke. And so I thought that was kind of interesting because I know that for myself and my own experience of anxiety that it can feel like that constricting force inside of the body, that sense of fear. And so as we talk about anxiety as well, I really want to shout out one of my mentors, Dr. Robert Baird, because he's really helped me to understand that anxiety, he's a therapist and he doesn't believe in the word anxiety. And I quite honestly feel the same way. I think that anxiety is a word that has sort of been used in the clinical space to talk about like this light feeling of fear that occurs inside of the body. And so what I mean when I say that I don't believe in anxiety, or I don't think it exists, is that I think anxiety is sort of like a cute word, like a cute sort of phrase for what's really going on inside of the body, which is fear. And so when I have clients who I work with who are saying something like, I'm feeling anxiety inside of my body, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety lately, it's kind of like an easy way to like intellectualize or brush off like this occurrence. But when I confront them about it, I don't say, I don't say what's going on with your anxiety. I say, what's the fear? What are you afraid of? What's going on in there? Because ultimately that's what anxiety is it's a sense of fear. And so there are many ways that this fear can develop, but essentially a couple of reasons, just genetically and through just understanding survival skills. Obviously, our brains are primed to seek danger or to look out for things that may not be there. And especially now that we have the ability to cognize future events happening, that definitely leads to a sense of fear in the future. And so that is essentially what anxiety or fear is kind of like this feeling of something may happen in the future. Because I know when I'm embodied and living in the present moment, I do have that opportunity to let fear dissolve. And that's what Eckhart Tolle talks about too. In some of his books, and in The Power of Now, that fear, when touched by pure consciousness, dissolves. And I've found in myself that that's like a great theory. It doesn't always work in practicality super well. I've noticed for myself when I'm in a state of just intense fear that is gripping me, I find that it can be really difficult to like self-soothe at times. But that is what this process is the process of self-soothing. And typically what we also find as well when it comes to anxiety and or fear is that there's an overactive amygdala. And the amygdala is sort of like the fire alarm center in the brain. The amygdala is what is responsible for releasing adrenaline and cortisol in moments of intense stress. And so it's what's on the lookout. It's the fire alarm bells, and it's located in the hindbrain. And so when we get into a state of fear, we are reverted back into sort of the lizard brain. And so as we kind of talk about this, it's important to understand that process that's happening inside of the brain and also the other processes that are occurring as well. And so we do have in psychology this theory of polyvagal theory. And polyvagal theory is really important to understand because there are essentially 3 different states that our body can be in. We can be in what's called ventral vagal, or where we're able to kind of be relaxed. Our body's able to digest, we're able to replenish nutrients and have a moment of reprieve from the world. There's also sympathetic. This is what is known as fight or flight. This is that patterning where, there's like this little bit of a current of fear running under the surface and we're looking out for danger. And then we also have what's known as dorsal vagal, which is the freeze response. And so we don't need to get too complex into these words. They're all big words, but essentially what we're saying here is there's a safe level, there's the fight or flight level, and then there's the freeze level. And so I myself have experienced each one of these levels in my life. There was a example when I was on a middle school field trip with just a couple of my friends. We were walking down and we were out. I grew up in Montana, so we were out in the woods walking on a field trip. And one of the kids decided to hide in the woods, in the bushes right next to the trail. And we didn't actually know he was in there. And he started making bear noises. And he made it sound really realistic. And all my friends bolted. But in that moment, I just had a moment where I just like froze, like my nervous system just completely shut down. And so just understanding that that wasn't like a conscious decision that I made to like just completely shut down my body. That was something very primal inside of me. after my friend walked out of the bush and, we had a good laugh about it, I was able to recognize that I thought that was kind of strange how my body just immediately shut down. I've had to process that for myself and understand that I, the ego functioning, am not in control of what happens in my body, but I do have the ability to help regulate what's going on in my body. And so it's important to understand these 3 stages, because what we're trying to do is get back into ventral vagal, or get back into that safe zone. And one of the ways we can go about doing that, the first step to overcoming our anxiety, is by connecting to the breath. It's important to connect to the breath because the breath is the only mechanism inside of our body that has the ability to both be autonomous and something that we can regulate ourselves as well. I can control my breath, and my breath can also run on autopilot. And typically what happens when I'm getting into a fear state is that my breath shortens and it tightens and it stays up into my chest. And so what I do when I notice this is I just take deeper breaths into my lower stomach and abdomen, and you can even practice this now. And just by the process of taking these deeper breaths, my nervous system begins to calm down. It's a way to tell my amygdala that everything is okay. It's a way to tell the cells in my body that we're getting oxygen, that we're safe, that it's okay to go back into digestion, that it's okay to go back into this ventral vagal or this safety mode to repair the body. And so it's really important to just, when we have those moments, to recognize, we just take a deep breath and slow down. And this is why I actually really recommend the practice of meditation, because it can train us to go in our day-to-day life to come back to the breath. So I really do recommend a meditation practice, even just 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, to just focus on our breathing. Because when we're in those fear states, the one thing we can't control is our breath. The cortisol may be there, the fear may be there. And quite honestly, I don't even know if overcoming fear is possible, in the sense that it's not something to be overcome. It's something to acknowledge and to dance with. And so I recognize even that paradox in the video title. I don't necessarily think that fear is something to be overcome. I think that it's something to work with through our life. And so that first step is breathing and grounding ourselves. The second step is actually practicing gratitude. I think that one thing we can do for breathing is to focus on gratitude. And I don't mean gratitude in the sense of just like willy-nilly kind of the new age sort of version of gratitude. I mean gratitude in the sense of connecting back to our heart and remembering that we're okay. When I get into fear states, typically a lot of the time what happens is I get into a scarcity mindset and things start compounding. I don't think there's enough, and that really can trigger that fear state. But if I can breathe, the knowing in that there is more than enough, and that I'm completely okay, and that I have food to drink and a place to sleep. I have food to drink, I have food to eat and water to drink and a place to sleep, then I will be okay, and that I am okay in this moment. Another step is you can do what's known as tapping. So tapping is just bilateral tapping. It's a way to regulate the nervous system. It also disrupts patterns inside of the body. And so at times I will even tell myself and breathe to myself that I am okay. I actually learned this from another mentor of mine, and it's really helped me to just repeat to myself that I'm okay. And it's also okay to not be okay. But this bilateral tapping helps my body to come back into the present moment. I come back into my body and reground. And so this bilateral tapping can be something that's done without really even the awareness of others knowing. You can also do it on your thighs as well, if you just like kind of tap back and forth, but just some kind of touch inside of the body can be really helpful. And we also have moving the body. This is tip number 4. And this one, hands down, is the best thing that you can do for anxiety or fear that you experience. I know for myself, by going on a jog, even if it's just 10, 20 minutes, immediately I'm in a different state of mind. Getting down on the floor and doing some push-ups or going out and having some exercise is one of the best things I can do to calm down my mind. If I go on a long run in the mornings, or even I train jujitsu, so if I go and train jujitsu and at the end of that hour or whatever that I'm rolling, I no longer have any anxiety in the body. And it's kind of weird because I'm putting myself into an uncomfortable situation. I'm going and getting choked out by other people. I'm not experiencing that same level of fear. It's almost like in that exhaustion, in that exertion, I'm like moving that energy through, and it's almost like my ego doesn't even have the mental energy anymore to continue to fight against, the universe. It's like it's able to just kind of like surrender to the moment. I no longer have that same amount of energy to just like have that level of fear. It exhausts my ego in a good way. And then the last step is to seek support. We don't have to do this alone. I know that for men especially, we typically like to isolate and do things in solitude. I'm guilty of this myself. I think it's really important to ask for help, especially if you're going through something. There have been times in my life when I've had really difficult situations where I've been suicidal, where I've experienced deep amounts of fear, where I've been working through some of my own traumatic incidents. And it was just through the grace of having the courage to ask for help from those around me that I received support immediately. People want to help you. People want to give to you. People are very caring in that way. And if you don't perceive that world and you perceive that there's just threat around you, it's really important to find a space where you can ask for help. I do recommend 12-step fellowship groups, even if you don't consider yourself an addict. Perhaps ACA, Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families and Alcoholics, is an extremely impactful group that you can go to completely for free. I also work with clients one-on-one, so if you did want to work together, you can always schedule a call using the link down below. But finding a safe space, perhaps a men's group or a place where you can start processing these emotions. Because what's happening is typically there's an emotion that's stuck inside of the body, and what we can do somatically is start working with that through breath work, through discussing it with others. And then in retreat settings or in men's groups, there are also some other ways you can get deeper into the body and start working with some things as well. But just for some starters, one thing you can do right now is, again, coming back to the breath, remembering that I am okay, that I have everything that I need in this moment, and that I am supported. Whether I choose to believe it or not, it is truth. And so with that, it's really important to just understand that it is okay. And if you did need help, there is support. So with that, thank you so much for tuning into this video. I'm going to just reiterate, so the 5 different aspects that we have: breathing and grounding yourself, practicing gratitude, coming back into those feelings of the heart. We also have tapping. So tapping the body bilaterally to help disrupt any anxious patterns or fear patterns, moving your body, and then seeking support. And these are all great ways. And I know that for men, it can be difficult for us to express or to ask for help from, just our conditioning of not being able to talk about what's going on inside of our bodies. But I want to let you know that there is support. And it just involves, you do have to be your own rescuer in some cases. You do have to be the one to step out of your comfort zone and ask for help. And that can be one of the most powerful things that you do for your life. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in. If you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, it would help this video to get into YouTube's algorithm. If you're on Spotify, if you wouldn't mind rating 5 stars as well, that would really help the podcast to grow. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, you can always schedule a call down below. And other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.